Okay, to start this bag, we're going to make a chain loop. So I've made 96, so it's 96 chain you want to make, and then join together with a slip stitch at the end. So obviously make sure you don't end up with a twisted chain before you join it. Right, so once you've joined your chain, you're going to chain one, which I've already done, and then we're going to work straight into the very first chain that we joined together there. Okay, so that's your first chain, that's your slip stitch, and that's your last chain. So that would be 96 from there to that one there. Okay, so we're going to work in a pattern. So we've chained one because we're going to do a single crochet in that next space. Then we're going to do another single crochet in the next chain. And then we're going to do 2 half double crochet. The next 2 chain. And then we're going to do 2 double crochet. So what we're trying to do is create a bit of a wave of height using different height stitches. So can you see how we're climbing and making that taller? So we've gone from a short stitch to a medium stitch to a tall stitch. Now we're going back down to medium stitch, which is half double crochet. So we're going to do 2 half double crochet. And that would complete our 8 stitches. So this bag works in repeated 8. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8. And then we're going to start again with that lower stitch, which is the single crochet. And we're just going to keep repeating that pattern all the way around till we get to the last stitch. So 2 single, 2 half double, 2 double, 2 half double, and then repeat. So 2 single, 2 half double, 2 double, and 2 half double. So once I've done my last half double, I'll have done 2 repeats. I'll show you that now, and then I'll let you go around the rest of the chain ring before I show you what to do next. So yeah, you can just see that the pattern's emerging there with a nice little pointy shape. Right, okay, do that and then we'll do the next bit. Right, so I've come to the last one, and I've put my last half double crochet into chain number 96. So now I want to get my next colour, colour B, and slip stitch. So we're going to imagine we're going to slip stitch through this cream yarn, and we're going to go into the first single crochet of the row, then get the colour B, leave a longish tail for sewing in later, and then we're going to slip stitch using the new colour. So back through the single crochet, and then through the loop that was on the hook. Okay, and then, so it's always a bit fiddly doing it like this. And then I just usually turn over the work and just tighten up the cream yarn and the new colour. And then what I'm going to do is just tie that tail onto the working yarn of the cream, tie that on. And then you've got a long enough tail on your new colour to sew in. And you're going to keep the cream attached because we're going to just use it without having to cut it off every time. We're just going to make a float that goes up the inside of the bag. Okay, so now we're working on the green. So I'm going to show you what to do next because we're going to start doing this puff stitch in the green. Right, so rather than chaining two, because if we do what I'm going to do instead, it won't be as visible, so it won't have as much of a seam going through the bag. So we're going to pull up a long loop like this, yarn over, and then we're going to do a puff stitch into the first single crochet. So I've yarned over, I've gone in, I've got 3 loops on hook, I'm going to yarn over again, go in again until I've got 5 loops on hook, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 5. And you can see that's given a puff effect, and it's quite a tall stitch. So we're working the taller stitch, the puff stitch, into the shorter stitches from the row before, so they end up balancing each other out. So the second single crochet will have a puff stitch. So yarn over, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over again, yarn over, pull through. So as long as you've got the 5 loops on hook, you've got it right. Pull through all 5. So that's 3. We need 1 more that's going into this half double crochet because we do want that chevron look, but we don't want it to be very, very chevron. Okay. Through, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 puff stitches, and then we're just going to do 4 single crochet into the last 4 of that 8 repeat. Simple. I hope you think. Right, okay, so you can see where we're getting that height evened off now, because we do want the top edge of the bag to be not too chevron, just so we can make a nice straight edge on it. Okay, so we've got 4 there. And then we're going back to our, sorry, dog's barking again, puff stitches. So we're going to do 4 puff stitches. Okay, so we just want to carry on in that way, doing 4 puff stitches and 4 single crochet and 4 puff stitches and so on all the way around. I'll show you what to do when we get to the other end. Right, so I've come to the end of the row. So that was on a single crochet, my last of the 4. So that means the repeat is even. Okay, so we're going to slip stitch into the first puff stitch, that long loop that we made, and we're going to slip stitch in the new colour. So again, I'm going to leave a long enough tail for sewing in afterwards, and pull the new loop through, and then slip stitch through. Right, so we're going to just pull on the working yarn of the green, the darker green, tighten it up to this mint green, turn it over, and then again the tail of the new colour we're going to tie on to the working yarn of the green. So when you make anything in the round, if you don't turn each row, you'll end up with a join, a seam that goes off at an angle. Now this stitch doesn't matter quite so much because you don't really see the seam, but if you are slightly aware of it and it is going off at an angle, it can be a bit unsightly. So what I suggest we do is we're going to turn each time we go down the next row, but it's slightly tricky because obviously now we've got 3 different colours of yarn attached, and what we want is we want the float of colour to always stay on the inside of the bag, which is this side where the loose ends are. So we've slip stitched into that stitch, but now we're going to turn, sorry, I nearly chained one, but we're not going to chain one, and then we're going to bring a long loop up, because when we turn you can see that we're going to have to start the row with the puff stitch again, because you always work the puff stitch into the single crochets. Okay, so we're going to pull up a tall loop, yarn over, puff stitch into the first single crochet, easier said than done. It's just splitting slightly, this mint colour. Right, okay, so there's our first one, second, third, and fourth single crochet. So 4 puff stitch, each going into the 4 single crochet that we finished with on the last row. So that's again evening out the height. The taller stitch sits onto the shorter stitch, and so on and so on. So we're going to do the same thing, come all the way around again, keeping your float colour on the inside, and then we'll turn again and we'll go back the other way and we'll join in our last colour then. Right, so I've come to the end of that row now, and I've just done my last single crochet. So now I'm ready to bring in the very last colour. So I'm going to slip stitch in that tall loop. Make sure I get both bits of it. Okay. Leave a long enough tail to sew in again. Pull it through and pull it through. So now we're on the inside of the bag at the moment with this row. So we need to make sure that this working yarn of the green we've just used stays on the inside. So we don't want any floats on the outside of the bag. Okay, I'll pull it all tight. And also bring that tail onto the inside as well. And we're going to tie the tail to the working yarn of the last colour on the inside, because we're on the inside at the moment. Okay. And then we can turn and start working back the other way. So you try not to get tangled up in all the balls of yarn that are attached to this now. This is why any project like this, I usually sit at the table to do this, so that I can keep all the balls of yarn separate, so they're not going to tangle up with each other. Right, and we're ready to carry on. So we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to do 4 puff stitches into there, 4 single crochets into there, and so on and so on. And then you're just going to repeat these 4 rows until you've done 31 rows. Right, so I've just joined my last row, row 31. So we want to turn, keeping the float on the inside again. But we won't need floats now because we're going to work in rows. Right. So I'm going to bring in the next colour, which is the gold. Okay, so this time I've just joined the gold into the slip stitch of the previous row to create sort of a chain 1. Because when we're working in rows now, it doesn't really matter about this edge, because at the end, when we finish the bag, we're going to put an edge in all the way around the edge, top edge of the bag and up around the edges of the straps. So it doesn't matter if this edge looks a little bit messy. So I've just taken that yarn through the loop that I'd left from the last row, and I've created a sort of a chain one. But obviously, because I'm about to do my puff stitches, I don't really need to make a chain there. So I'm going to yarn over, so that loop will be pulled up tall like we've been doing throughout. I'm going to start the pattern again, just like we've been used to doing with the main body of the bag. So this time we're going 4, 4, 4. So we're going to do 5 lots of 4, so 20 stitches. So that's going to be the width of the bag strap, sorry. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 singles, and so on. So carry on with that row until you've done 20 stitches, and then we're going to have to remove the yarn from the next colour that we're going to use, because we want to use it at this end. So we will have to cut that off, fasten it off, and start it at the other end. Okay, so I've just done that first row of the bag strap. So now I'm going to get the next colour that we need, which is the cream. So I'm going to tie that on to the green, and I'm going to fasten off both of those colours now. So again, I'm just going to leave a decent length tail for sewing in after. Tie those together. And while we're there, we may as well remove the other colours. So, or colour. So this is the green, mint green. So I'll tie that onto the cream. And as I say, any messy bits that are on this edge, this top edge, is fine, because we're going to encase that with an edging. Okay, so now we've got to the end of that row. At least when we work separately, even though it's a bit of a faff to keep fastening off colours, at least we're not going to end up with these tangled yarns like we've had previously. Okay, back to that row that I've just done, the first row of the strap. So now I want to join in another colour. So we're on the repeat, we're going to use cream now. So I'll fasten in that new colour. Just going to take it through that last loop that I made on the previous row. Pull that tight. Tie the 2 tails together, tail from the last colour that we finished, and the new one. Okay, so now we're ready to go back the other way. So now we are working a single crochet, because we're working into the puff stitch. So we will do a single chain to start with. Turn it round, and we're off again with this next row. So now that you know how to fasten in the new colour, similar to what we did before, you're just going to work in rows now. So we're on the next colour, cream, and there are 27 rows. So just keep working in the right colour sequence until you have 27 rows, and then I'll tell you what to do next. Okay, so when we've finished our bag strap and we've done our 27 rows and fastened all the ends off, So we're going to come to this side of the bag strap and count 28 stitches around. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So the 29th stitch is where we're going to want to start our next bag strap. So we're just going to put the hook in there, like we did before on the different rows that you've just finished doing on the other side. Just fastening with a slip stitch, and we can start again in this stitch. So we're actually in the single crochet, so we need to make our puff stitch into this first stitch. So on, as you've been used to doing. So obviously we're going to make it the same width as the other handle or strap. So we're going to do 20 stitches. So this is almost my first group of 4 puff stitches on this first row. And there we go. So the tail end that we created at the beginning of that stitch should be okay. It shouldn't work itself loose, but if you want to, you can just sew that end in, just if you're worried about that working its way loose. So yeah, now just going to do another strap exactly the same as we did on the other side, 27 rows, and then I'll show you how to join everything together and then we'll be done. Right, so I've finished my straps now. So I've left the green yarn attached because I'm going to use that to make the seam. And then I've turned the bag inside out. So I'm just going to join up the top of the straps, top edge of each strap together to form the full strap. So I'm going to line up the top edges. And because we want this strap to be quite strong, we're going to go through both loops. Sometimes you can make a neater, flatter seam if you only go through back loop and front loop only. That's useful for other things, but for a bag, I think we want it to be a bit stronger, so we're going to go through both loops. Right. Okay, so now I've got the edges lined up and I've got that last stitch still on. I'm going to go and I'm just going to pull that remaining loop through. So I've gone through the first stitch on the completed strap side, and then I'm just going to grab the loop that was left on the other side. And then pull that through, and then we can start seaming up the top. So I'm going to do a chain 1. So we've joined those 2 stitches together now, and then I'm going to go under the V of the next 2 stitches and just slip stitch them together. So I'm going to insert the hook under the V of that stitch and the V of that stitch, yarn over, pull through all the stitches, and then pull that stitch through the one that's on the hook. So continue in that way across till you've done the seam, but try not to pull too tight because you will end up bunching up the seam if you're not careful. So I'll just do a couple more to show you. So going under that V, and then all through, and then through that one, and loosen it a little bit and then next one. So quite straightforward, and I much prefer crocheting seams together than hand sewing. Find it very tedious hand sewing. Okay, so you'll see that seam's nice and neat. I'm going to finish it off. So when you've done the same, we'll come back and then we'll join up the bottom of the bag. Okay, so as you can see, that's made a nice neat seam, and on the right side it looks really nice now. Okay, so that's the bag seam done for the bag strap, and then we'll close up the bottom of the bag next, and then we'll edge the straps. Right, so I've just reattached the cream yarn because that's what I want to edge the bag with. If you want to use one of the other colours, that's absolutely fine, but I've used the cream. Okay, so I've just slip stitched my new yarn on, and I'm just going to do chain one. And then I'm going to go into that next end of the row and make a single crochet. And now we just want to work evenly around the edge. So you don't want to put so many stitches in that it ends up really frilly. And you don't want to put so few in that it bunches up. So you just need to sort of play it by ear. Luckily with cotton yarn, there's no stretch to it, so it won't sort of pull up even if you think you've put the right number of stitches in. The cotton yarn is quite true to the tension in that it'll stay in position and it won't stretch about. So that's where I've chosen to put my next one. So working into the row ends is kind of a bit make it up as you go along, because they're not obviously stitches, they're the stitches on their side, so you're working into the side. So I'm going to put my next one somewhere into that puff stitch, and I'm just trapping in my ends as well from the rows before that were fastened off, just to give it a neat finish. Okay, and then I'm just going to continue in that way, just finding places to put the stitches. Easier said than done. So that it looks neat. I think I'll get away with another one in there. So yeah, it's fairly tricky, but I mean, if you don't like how it looks, you can take it out and try again. It's not a huge amount to work on. I'm just going to show you where you're going to go. So you'll see that the edge of the strap makes a hole, a continuous circle with the edge of the bag. And when you come to work across the top edge of the bag, it gets easier because you've got real stitches to work into, and then you'll come up the other side of the strap. Okay, so you just want to go all the way around, and then when you come back to here, you're just going to slip stitch neatly into that chain and fasten off, and do the same for the other side. Okay, so that's my completed bag strap edge. Just need to tie in my loose end. But as you can see, it gives a nice neat finish, and it hides all those ends of the different colours that we had on that strap quite nicely. Okay, so then we're going to join up the bottom of the bag now. So we've done our strap, and you'll have obviously finished off the edges around both sides. I've only done that one side at the moment. So if we fold our bag so that our straps line up as they should once the bag is finished. So you can see I've just joined the strap roughly for now, so I can see that the edges at the top of the bag are lining up properly. So that will mean that you can then flatten down the bottom part of the bag, and then you're going to find the fold where you decided is right for your bag, and then take your hook and put it in to the two stitches that line up at the end, and then you're going to do exactly the same as before and do a row of slip stitch all the way along the bottom of the bag to close the bottom of the bag. So again, you're just going to see which of the chain lines up and then join them together. So obviously this time you've only got one loop on each edge because it's the chain stitch that we started with. So joining them together in just the same way. Until you get right the way across. Okay. Right, so we're going to do the final part now, which is just closing up the seam on the bottom of the handle so that eventually it will lay flat like this, and it's a nice cushioned part to go over the shoulder. Right, okay, so you need the seam on the bag strap, on the inside obviously, and then line up the edges of the cream edging that we did and try and get the seams to sit nicely one on top of the other. And then you can either pin it if you want, if you're worried that it'll move out of the alignment, or you can just go for it and we're going to start 10 centimetres this side and finish 10 centimetres on that side. Now, if you've not done this before, we are going to have to hand sew this part, unfortunately. So we're just going to get a big eye needle with our cream yarn on it again. And then we're going to whip stitch along, because when the whip stitch is flattened out, it does sit quite nice and flat on the inside. And obviously this is on the inside of the bag strap, so no one's ever going to see this part, so it doesn't matter if it's not mega neat. So obviously with sewing, we're just going to over sew a few times at the beginning just to make sure that little end doesn't come out, and we can obviously then snip it off neatly because we know it's not going to come out. Right, and then we're just going to carry on. So I'm going to hold these seams together so I know they won't move, and then we're just going to carry on doing that over stitch. So it's called whip stitch, so we're just going to keep going in and pulling it through, so it's always wrapping over the edge of the seam. Okay, so we just want to carry on in that way until we've done 20 centimetres. Okay, so that's my finished seam. So you'll see that when we coax it flat, it's quite neat. And obviously that's on the inside of the bag strap. There we go, so we're done. So I've already finished off all my ends, but if you haven't, then you can finish that. And yeah, I hope you enjoy using your bag.